Alara's fingers trembled against his jawline, the only sign that her composure had cracked. The medical bay hummed with sterile light, but the air between them was electric, charged with the terrifying relief of survival. She didn't ask if he was okay. She simply pressed her forehead against his, breathing in the scent of ozone and sweat that clung to his skin. It wasn't just that he had survived the arena. It was that he had walked out of the lion's den without a scratch, leaving her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. For a moment, the roar of the crowd faded, leaving only the magnetic pull of their shared existence and the heat of a lingering gaze that said what protocol forbade them to speak. That silence was a stark contrast to the deafening judgment that had filled the sky vault only 1 hour prior. The crystalline dome of Nova Prime amplified every sound, turning the murmurs of the high-ranking Xeno-overseers into a cacophony of elitist judgment. They had gathered to witness a spectacle of biological dominance, a cruel test of their latest creation against what they considered a lower life form. This was Xeno-observation at its most arrogant. The overseers sat on floating platforms of light, looking down at the jagged basin floor. The terrain was designed to remove excuses. It was a flat, unforgiving circle illuminated by the harsh glare of a binary sun, offering nowhere to hide and nowhere to run. Silas Thorne stood at the center, a solitary figure in a minimalist flight suit. He looked small against the vastness of the arena, but his stillness was not fear. It was a calculated application of engagement doctrine. He wasn't relying on armor or weapons. He was relying on the physics of the human form. Beside the viewing glass, Alara had watched, her knuckles white as she gripped the railing. She knew what was coming. The massive containment gates groaned open, and the bioengineering nightmare emerged. The Void Reaper was a mass of sleek muscle and chitin, designed solely for apex-yielding aggression. It didn't just move. It distorted the space around it with sheer velocity, tearing up the ground as it shrieked a sound, designed to paralyze prey through psychological dominance. Silas didn't flinch. He shifted his stance, a subtle adjustment of unarmed superiority that went unnoticed by the alien crowd. They expected him to flee. They expected the HFY spirit to manifest as brute force or desperate weapon usage. They were wrong. Silas wasn't looking at the claws or the teeth. He was performing an instant vector analysis of the creature's center of mass. He didn't treat the monster as a threat. He treated it as terrain. The Void Reaper launched itself, closing the distance with terrifying speed. It was a blur of violence, a linear force of nature committed entirely to the kill. But Silas understood the flaw in its perfection. The most dangerous hunter isn't the one who strikes first, but the one who decides where the strike lands. As the beast roared, overcommitting to its charge, Silas stepped forward. He didn't outrun the predator. He lived inside its arc. The massive limb descended like a pile driver, tearing through the air where Silas had stood a fraction of a second before. He didn't block. Blocking would have shattered every bone in his body. Instead, he flowed around the impact point, applying a terrifyingly precise kinetic control to the creature's elbow joint. The entire arena held its breath as the laws of physics took vengeance on the beast's aggression. By stepping inside the guard, Silas accessed the creature's blind spot. The Void Reaper, blinded by its own ferocity, couldn't adjust its trajectory. This was momentum exploitation in its purest form. Silas placed one hand on the creature's extending tricep and the other on its shoulder, adding just enough lateral force to destabilize its center of gravity. The beast wasn't just missing. It was falling, its own massive weight betraying it. Alara watched from the balcony, her heart slamming against her ribs. She saw what the alien overseers couldn't, the calculated brilliance of human adaptability. To the Xeno-overseers, it looked like magic. To Alara, it was the beautiful, terrifying dance of a man refusing to die. Silas drove his heel into the dirt, anchoring himself as he guided the creature's primary limb into the jagged basin floor. The impact shook the crystalline walls. The Void Reaper shrieked, not in pain but in confusion. It tried to scramble up, but Silas was already moving. He maintained contact, shifting his weight to keep the creature off balance, pinning the lethal claw with nothing more than leverage and geometry. It was a master class in minimalist movement. He didn't strike the beast, he simply removed its ability to stand. For a long, agonizing moment, the man and the monster were frozen in a tableau of dominance. Silas stared into the creature's multiple ocular sensors, his breathing steady, his gaze unwavering. He projected total psychological dominance. He wasn't prey. He was the environment, the inevitable wall against which the beast had thrown itself. The creature, sensing an unfamiliar and superior force, stopped thrashing. Its instincts, tuned for apex-yielding combat, recognized a stalemate it couldn't break without exposing its throat. Slowly, deliberately, Silas stepped back. He didn't execute the creature. He didn't need to. He simply pointed toward the containment gate. The Void Reaper, stripped of its confidence and confused by a prey that refused to act like prey, chittered nervously and retreated into the shadows of its cell. The silence that followed was absolute. Then the holographic scoreboard flickered, unable to process a victory without a kill, before finally flashing the human victory symbol. Hours later, the adrenaline had faded, leaving only the dull ache of bruised muscles and the sterile hum of the medical bay. Alara was still holding him, her hands running over his shoulders, as if to confirm he was solid, real. The memory of the arena felt distant, replaced by the immediate warmth of her presence. "You didn't have to humiliate it," she whispered, her voice rough with suppressed emotion. Silas pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes. The intensity of the fight was gone, replaced by a softness reserved only for her. He took her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm, grounding himself in the touch. "I wasn't trying to humiliate it," he said quietly. "I just needed to make sure I was the one walking back to you." Alara closed her eyes, leaning into him, the terror of the day finally dissolving into peace. In the end, the physics of combat didn't matter. The only momentum that mattered was the force that kept pulling them back together, defying every probability the universe threw their way.